when you bring the hot rod into the 21st century. Getting out here in between some things, managing to test fit. I'm about to start indexing the new timing marks on the brand new serpentine pulley that I just got back from Alex Krauss. And it is a beautiful piece. It is a 5 rib, not a 6 rib, but that's because we really didn't have room for a 6 rib belt. Although I think a 5 rib is going to be plenty. The only thing that's different right here that will be different on the engine this is going on is this washer right here is drilled for 3 holes. This is drilled for 3 holes. And those 3 holes correspond with the 3 threaded holes in the crank gear back here. So what you get is a bolt in the center with a nice washer that holds everything nice and sturdy to the crank, and then everything is held sturdy to the timing gear via these 3 bolts. So we're no longer relying on these 2 pins. These 2 pins here are now only for timing alignment. And that's what I've done with the stock factory crank on this car. Because we were going to be turning a supercharger, and it's worked out really well. Absolutely beat on that crank pulley down there. Some serious belt tension on it too, both directions, and have not had one issue with the alignment pins. The new pulley should fall right in line with the original belt, which puts it right on the inside edge of this right here. What that's going to allow me to do excuse me, what that's going to allow me to do is utilize all that dead space down there behind that crank pulley to get more traction on that belt, so we can turn the boost up and stop having belt slip. What that also allows me to do, if you notice, I'm running the alternator off the outer groove. The water pump also has multiple groove pulleys. I have a single groove pulley that I'm going to run that fits this position. So we're going to run the alternator and the water pump on their own V-belt, separate from the supercharger. That way, if we have a supercharger problem, we can limp it back without boost. Or we don't, if we lose a supercharger belt, provided it doesn't get wrapped up in the crank and also take the V-belt, we have alternator and water pump. Or at very least, if we have that happen, we can throw another belt on the water pump and alternator and get it home. We intend to drive this thing to events. So, future planning in mind, we did not combine everything. There is another one of these pulleys getting ready to be cut, since this one's been verified to fit. As soon as I get it on the engine and run it, and we don't have any weird vibration issues, we're going to cut one that's lightweight, that will have some lightning holes in here, as well as from about here in, a lot of material can come out, because the thickness here doesn't need to be there, just right here, because the V-belt cuts in pretty deep. There's also room on the back. I don't know if you can see it in there. There's a step. That was unintentional initially, but since it's there, it can be used. There is room for a steel reluctor to be like a press fit or maybe a bolt on to the back of this particular pulley, so you can have a crank trigger or distributorless ignition. Something of note when you are installing sniper systems. Sniper systems are extremely sensitive to radio interference, electrical interference of any kind, you name it. Everything has to be grounded and routed properly. When it comes time to route your distributor wiring, if you are using a distributor as a crank trigger for the MSD box or for your sniper system, or in our case, the MSD box and the sniper system, get a shielded extension if you need it. If not, invest in some stuff to wrap around your signal wire, which is always the twisted purple and green, to keep it from RF. It costs a little bit more, but you won't be fighting problems. So what you end up with is, in an NA application, this is your fuel pressure regulator. It's regulated to, I think, 58 point something, according to the book. Fuel inlet, fuel outlet. That's it. Now, in a boosted application, they want you to cap this, and they want you to run a boost referenced fuel pressure regulator, because you need fuel to come in and you need fuel to be raised. The pressure needs to be raised when boost is introduced. So let's say that's set at 58.3 or 58, whatever it is, 58. It says set at 58. If my fuel pressure needs to rise because my boost rises, that can't do it. This can. So this has to be plumbed in. And what they do is they have you just deadhead the fuel pressure directly into this at that point, because this is doing all the work to regulate the fuel pressure. Setup is slightly larger in diameter. It's actually about the same diameter as the actual ring on the old GMs. So there isn't a whole lot that has to be cut out if you realistically just wanted to put this in there. And these modules by themselves are nice because they're self-contained. That return line right there returns through that leg, and that leg returns directly into the bucket down there in the bottom of the fuel pump. So it's always got a fuel supply, even if it's down real low. Double sock. So there's a sock on the bottom and there's a sock on the top inside on the pump. And then there's your relief valve for when it's just sitting in a puddle. So it's not a bad setup, and they usually come with a wiring harness. So I'll be taking that little section out and welding it into the top of the Chevette tank. And then there is a bucket down inside there. Oh man, it's not going to focus to see, but I'm basically just going to put a little, like a half cup around the back side of the fuel. All right, pump gas tank modifications. So what we have on the right is the Cavalier tank, and the baffles are nothing more than a pan and one little flap, and it's just to kind of keep fuel right there by the pickup. The thing is, the pump sat in here kind of at an angle because the lines came down this way, whereas on the Chevette they're going to point forward. Well, that does a couple unique things in this particular tank that will allow me to minimize the baffling. Part of that is, as you see right here, this is pretty much centered in the tank, and it hits that little ribbed area. Well, this little ribbed area goes uphill down here. It goes down. because of the way this tank is designed. It wants fuel to be kind of like down here in this little sump area all the time. And when you turn the pump this direction, it turns the sock that direction. And it puts the reserve port up a little higher. Now, what this does is it only lets one or two of these feet touch, so I can either smack the middle of the tank with a hammer and dolly enough to get it to flatten out right there, so this sits all the way down, or I can just leave it as is, and it really won't be a problem. This is going to sit down in here. It's going to sit at an angle that allows that to go down and touch the bottom of the tank anyway, even in the sump area. And what I'm going to do is where this sits, I'm going to have just like a half moon shaped piece of steel that welds in here to the bottom, and then out here one this way and then one this way, and that's just going to keep the fuel puddled in here, so when we're going around corners or accelerating quickly, it doesn't run uphill away from the pump or from side to side. It has time to pick it up. And that's literally the only thing this tank needed, besides the hole cut bigger, because I'm using a fuel pump module. And what this does is it returns back through itself. So the return is built in to this leg, and it dumps it down through the pot and into the pickup at the pre-sock at the bottom of the pump. So even when the tank is really crazy low, the return is still feeding the pump sump in the module. And then here is your vent, and it's plenty big. What I've done here is I've taken off the plastic line, and I've gone to the push lock stuff. This will be crimped fittings here, but then it's AN from here on out. Simple enough. And it came with a pigtail. It's easy to wire in, and this particular one should still be the 0 to 90 ohm rheostat that works with the 80 style gauge. So it really should be like rewire, plug and play. So because we are using a module and not just an open pump, the baffling gets a lot easier, because most of the baffling is already done for you, and the return is returned into there, which it gives you better odds of keeping the pump full of fuel. So really, I just need to keep fuel around this most of the time. That really should be just about enough. Right, that blue line right there is where the back of the pump is. I may want to put a couple little spots over here, just that protrude out a little bit, just to control the side to side. But because we're using that module, again, that module will almost always be full of fuel until this is empty. We just have to keep that last sock covered in fuel right there. So I'm going to test fit one more time, but as of right now, we line that up back there. That puts us right there. A little further forward than the factory setup was, but that gives us enough room to push it down to lock it in and seal it, and that gives us room for the lines. All right, well, I'm down to welding. Got a couple little more things to trim here, really, but I'm down to putting it together. This is all I needed out of that Cavalier tank. Crazy. Get the light on the situation. Got a baffle over here, goes up the side. Got a baffle over there, goes up the side. Got a baffle that encompasses the back of the pump. This is more than enough. I also smashed that little area right in there with a hammer till it went flat, and that pump sat flat on that floor. So now I gotta clean everything up, weld that in, weld that in, weld that in, and then weld this in. And that is now a Chevette tank for EFI. All right, well, the garage is an absolute disaster at the moment, but oh, the new fuel fill location is here. Mostly because of the wide body that's going on here. Oh, but tank is in. Recoated a couple of areas. Well, I recoated the entire bottom because of the welds. But this was the old feed line. As you can see, the return line is set up to accept the old feed line. That is now the return line. There is an AN fitting hiding back there. That is going to go to the fuel filter location, which will be where the old fuel pump was at. And then I'm just going to run the feed line up with the return line. And because it's late tomorrow morning, I will be making the spacer block that goes here. It's going to bring this out to about here. I would like to put it up here because how cool is that? It lines right up with the hole in the fender. I can just leave that bolt out. But it doesn't really line up with the placement of the lines very well for that. So I'm going to build a spacer. It's going to be about here. And then I got to hack the return line somewhere in here and flare it, and then put the rubber between it and the return on the fuel pressure regulator, and then plumb the push lock line up to the feed for this, and then the push lock from here to the throttle body. And we're plumbed. We have a fuel system. All right, so let me shut my fan off so you can appreciate how quiet this fuel pump actually is. Okay. Can't hear it right now because it's not on right now. That is all the louder that pump is. I'll even go back here. It's so quiet. Okay, I think everything is set. I've tried to crank it once and I was getting way too much fuel, but I also do not have the locked out distributor in here, and I'm doing this wrong because I want to hear it run. Come on, come on, come on. Ah. May have to charge the battery. Damn. All right, I'm gonna charge the battery. Okay, take two. Come on, come on, come on, come on. There we go. Come on, come on, baby, come on. Damn it. Take three. Out of time. However, it runs. made its first successful trip up to the gas station. Definitely some bugs to work out. Oh, it's gonna be down to the wire like it always is. She still got some stumbles, but I still also have to apply boost because I don't have a boost hat on the throttle body yet. I did finally figure it out though. I have to set this thing up like it has a turbo, and then it gives me the options to be able to set the timing for boost and things like that. So it was a learning curve, but I think I got it licked. Now it's doing the learning process. I got to drive it around a little bit, and then I'm going to throw it on the laptop and smooth out the tables. Hopefully the only thing I'll have to really fix is the fuel trim for the starting, because it doesn't like to. It's just a little bit rich, but it's getting better. Throttle tip-in's getting better. So at some point here in the next day or so, this thing should be finished. This thing sounds so sinister from the street, and it's actually a little quieter than it used to be. Partly because the supercharger is not building boost. As soon as I get boost on it, that exhaust note's going to get much deeper.
I love that I can hear that over the fuel pump now.
Alright, well, like I said, it wasn't the one that I wanted, because the one that I wanted was literally walking out the junkyard and no amount of money in my pocket was going to pry it out of that guy's hand. He thought it was funny. However, I got the secondary idea. I kind of like this better because I actually ended up with the hood room. It's well below the fender line, so there won't be any hood clearance issues. And there's a little bit more volume up here, and the way the air goes in it is seemingly a little smoother than the low profile one for the Jeep, even though most of the aftermarket ones that are low profile look like the ones from the Jeep. That cost me $8. I had to remove the ridges around the inside edge of this that locked it in place to the throttle body, so it fit over the Holley. But now that it fits over the Holley, I'm going to thread a brass fitting in here for the boost stuff, and then I got to get a 3-inch to 2.5-inch adapter collar to put the blow-off valve back in there. A couple T-clamps, and we're back in business making boost again.